speaker for The Secret Life of Professional Muslimah, Nosayba El-Sayed. Dr. Nosayba El-Sayed completed her PhD at the University of Toronto, during which time she interned at Amazon's Data Center Global Services Division to work on server outage analysis and prediction. Afterwards, Nosayba became a postdoctoral associate at MIT. Her research focused on designing and implementing data-driven techniques that exploit the wealth of data generated in modern platforms to improve the reliability and performance of data centers. Her work on data center reliability received a Sigmetrics Best Paper Award from the Special Interest Group of the Association for Computing Machinery. Currently, Nosayba is a professor at Emory University, where she teaches
computer science.
Where she teaches computer science subjects and works on data-driven system optimization research projects. Everyone, please help me welcome Dr. Nosayba El-Sayed.
I appreciate the introduction. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. This is my first time visiting Georgia Tech, and I'm really happy to be part of this event. I'm honored. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much. I was told that the committee suggested this catchy title for my session, and I immediately told Yara, yes, of course, I want that catchy title. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, I have to make my life sound way more interesting than it really is. Otherwise, what secrets can I talk about, right? So I'm gonna try to split this workshop between me telling you a little bit about what I think are important things for a Muslim professional woman to know. But then I want the second half, or even a little bit more, of this workshop to be interactive. So I want to hear from you, I want us to have a discussion, I want to know what's on Muslim women's and men's mind when it comes to professional life, and we can have an open discussion about it together. So after the introductions, I'm going to talk briefly about what I think are 5 secrets for a professional Muslimah's life, and then we can do the Q&A, okay? So introductions, I guess I don't have to repeat what Yara has already told you. So I'm a computer science professor at Emory. Before that, I worked as a researcher at MIT. I did my PhD in Toronto. I worked also briefly at Qatar Computing Research Institute, and I interned at Amazon Web Services. I guess one takeaway from this slide would be for you to know where I'm coming from. I come from a very academic-heavy background, so the only non-academic place I've worked in, so this was a research lab, those were universities. Amazon is the only company or corporate environment that I worked in. So that's for you to know sort of where I'm coming from and what's my professional background. Now I want to know, just a show of hands to get to know people in the room. So let's see, how many of you are currently students? Okay, this seems to cover almost everyone. How about graduating soon, from those who raised their hands? Okay, we have a few, almost 3. And if you're not a student, anyone currently working full-time in a corporation? Okay, all right. So we have a nice composition of different backgrounds. Anyone working in academia, from those who said they're working full-time? Okay, so I'll bring that perspective to the table. I'll be the academic in the room. Anyone working in government? All right, so we have a nice composition between different backgrounds. So let me move on to what I think are some of those secret components of a Muslim woman professional's life. Okay, so this here is my secret number 1. So this shows the desk space from the lab where I was graduate students for more than 5 years. And I would summarize it by saying every Muslimah kind of needs her coffee fix, but that maybe shouldn't be the case for everyone. Caffeine addiction and caffeine dependency is not great for you, but that was kind of a big part of my life back then. I had this weird habit of collecting coffee paper cups. Anyone here recognize the brand on the coffee paper cups? Tim Hortons, yeah. It's regularly consumed in a country far, far away called Canada, right? So I collected these paper cups, and having that coffee, the morning fix, was part of my routine, and it helped me get into the mood and get work done. And of course, every computer scientist needs their hardware, needs their monitors to get work done. So if you're taking notes, coffee and hardware were an important part of my professional life as a graduate student. But let's move on to deeper secrets in the life of a professional Muslimah. So unfortunately, I don't need to tell you that mainstream media has all these portrayals of Muslim women that are not necessarily accurate. I would say even Muslim men, right? So typically a Muslim woman in the media is portrayed as a sort of a passive victim, rarely an active agent in a plot that demonstrates her power, success, and strength, right? But one thing when I reflect on my professional life, I feel like it was really healthy not to let that external narrative define who you are. So when you start in a workplace and you have all these concerns sometimes about other people's possible preconceived notions about you, my advice is forget about all of that. I know you might start being subject to either conscious or unconscious bias, but what I would advise you to do is always start with this perception of a fresh slate, and you start to control the narrative. So write your own narrative, okay? Don't let whatever external narrative out there define who you are, because that's going to affect how you conduct yourself and how you interact with your office mates and your lab mates. Another thing I would add before leaving the slide is don't let your reaction to this narrative also define who you are. So you're not limited to a person who's only fighting a misleading narrative out there, rejecting it, resisting it. This is something we collectively participate in, and we all need to do that. At some point we find ourselves doing that, but don't let that define you. You also want to be part of the, focus on your vision, your mission, and your goals. So you want to be part of a narrative that defines your interests, not only what someone else is saying about you and you are responding to them. So I think that's one thing that helped me when I was working in these different workplaces. I focused on basically defining my own story. Okay? I would say be yourself. If you're both Muslim and you're a woman, if you're both of these, then that makes you part of a minority group, doubled, I guess, if you're in a workplace, especially in STEM, where the ratios between men to women is skewed. But again, that doesn't mean you have to conform to a culture that doesn't necessarily resonate with who you are. So I would generally say be yourself, but if you are a mean person, don't be yourself. Be someone else who's less mean. But anyway, that's a side joke. So be professional, positive, and friendly. Again, not because you're trying to prove something to someone, but because I would hope that goes along with your vision, mission, and goals. And because it's also part of our sunnah, it's part of our vision for who we want to be and what we want to do. Religiously and Islamically, our religion teaches us to be positive and friendly and outgoing. So I like that to be part of my narrative for myself. Okay, secret number 3, 2 more of these, and then we'll also hear from you about what you think. Either on one of these specific topics that I chose to focus on, or on other topics, okay? All right, secret number 3. I love this hadith. This is a saying for the Prophet where he told us that Allah loves when we engage in some work, to do that work with excellence, with proficiency. So have that as a guideline for you in whatever workplace you end up in. Strive for excellence, but I would like to add, strive for excellence, but not necessarily perfection. Because if you're only thinking, I have to be perfect, then you turn into a perfectionist, and trust me, it doesn't work. I tried it, I'm sure some of you have tried it, and it just ends up draining you, but seeking perfectionism isn't always the healthiest attitude towards having a good work-life balance and so on. So strive for excellence, not necessarily perfection. And I brought up Ibtihaj Muhammad's picture because she's badass, right? But also she has a number of really interesting quotes that I think are very inspirational. So in one of them she says, it's important to me that youth everywhere, no matter their race, religion, or gender, know that anything is possible with perseverance. And I think she lived that, right? She actualized that quote, which makes it even more inspiring. So for any Muslim woman, not necessarily an athletic, regardless of what your field is, regardless of where you end up working. You want to keep an eye on this, have it maybe printed, put it in front of you, remember it. Remember that this is part of our team at the end of the day to seek excellence, right? Okay, secret number 4. Show of hands if you've ever felt like you don't belong necessarily to a place because everyone else maybe knows what they're doing, but I don't. I still have that feeling till today. It looks like we have a majority in the room. So there's a name for that. It's imposter syndrome. It is more common than you think. And whenever they survey people in different fields, they find it, of course, with varying ratios, but it's really more common than what you think. So many people, they're very competent, smart, they actually know what they're doing, but they end up with that feeling that they don't belong, and that comes from different sources. One of the sources is being in an environment where you feel like a minority. Sometimes that contributes to it. Not all the time, so you might be suffering from imposter syndrome even if you're well, blended in the majority. So it's not necessarily the only reason, but it does contribute to it. So women in STEM, women in sciences and engineering, are more likely to experience imposter syndrome. And again, it's one of the reasons is because the ratios tend to be very skewed. So in STEM in general, the average ratio is 5:1. 70% of students in STEM in majors like computer science are male. This is very reflected in my own sample of students right now. So it does contribute to that feeling. That said, it's not the only factor. Other factors also play in. So if you're in a very competitive environments are more prone to people experiencing imposter syndrome, feeling like they don't belong. So for a Muslim woman, this is one of the things that I emphasize because again, it might come up because you're there's that intersectionality going on. Your gender might be a minority where you work, but also you're a religious visible minority. Sometimes not visible, sometimes visible, but you're still within a minority community. So sometimes that exacerbates the issue, exacerbates the problem. So it's something that I want you to know is very common, but when I reflect on my own personal experience, I was actually looking at 2 group photos that I took with the 2 research groups I was part of. The first one was in my PhD experience at the University of Toronto, the second one was at MIT. And I was thinking about that male to female ratio. So in the first one, we had more females in the lab, so the ratio was 4:1. The second one, the ratio was actually 10:1, where I did my postdoc research. One of the reasons was the topic. I just ended up working with hardware. Turns out hardware architecture is one of those subfields in computer science that has a significantly more skewed ratio between men and women than other subfields in the area. Now, when I was reflecting on these pictures and thinking about today's workshop, so I was thinking, okay, what's my takeaway? How do I reflect on these experiences? Truth is, alhamdulillah, I had a positive experience in both labs. So if you take this 10:1 ratio, alhamdulillah, these were some of the smartest and kindest people that I've worked with. My postdoc mentor was an amazing professor, very supportive. When I started applying for jobs, he helped me a lot with the recommendation process and so on. So I'm still in touch with many of these people, and some of these are still my mentors. I turn to them and I seek their advice. I'm going to talk about mentorship at the end of the slides before we move on to Q&A. But I do want to take away that even if you feel like you're a minority, among the minority, still don't let that get to you. You can still find allies, mentors, people who are willing to support you, who are willing to be there for you, it doesn't have to turn your experience into a negative experience. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Okay? All right, secret number 4. Actually, we're still talking about number 4. I did want to bring up that if you're different in your environment, that can actually be a plus for you and for the environment. Because you bring something to the table that no one else will bring. And you bring a different perspective, you bring a different skill set, a different background, and even in the culture and the vibe in the lab or in the company where you work, you're going to bring a different vibe and different maybe sets of interests that no one else has. So I was reflecting on my experience and thinking, yeah, no one else in my lab was interested in Islamic art, and specifically Arabic calligraphy. So this was my office space at MIT, and this is what my wall looked like. So anyone walking in would see this Arabic calligraphy behind me. And it's not that I was trying to scare my lab mates with mystical Arabic letters on the wall, even though I literally posted that on Facebook, that I'm trying to scare my office mates with mystical Arabic calligraphy. But they liked the post, so I think we're good. I think no harm done. I was just friendly to them, they were friendly to me, and they knew that this is one of my hobbies. And it was a very friendly environment where, things like that might, again, I don't want to generalize too much because there might be other environments where you feel more misunderstood. But if you find a good workplace with a healthy environment, then just be yourself, express your interests. If you're into Arabic calligraphy, don't worry about that. If you're looking for a prayer space, be proactive, be vocal. I was, again, reflecting on my experience, and this happened when I was transitioning from Toronto to Boston to work at MIT, and I was very optimistic. I moved to Boston, and I figured, of course, like Toronto, every building, 1 in 3 buildings is going to have a meditation space or a multi-faith area where people can pray. We had like 5 or 6 of those at University of Toronto's campus. They were all over the place. So if you're walking and you need to pray, you're just, oh, okay, where's the closest building, and you go and pray. And soon I realized it wasn't really like that in Boston. It was a little different. And the building I was working in was one of those big buildings at MIT, and it didn't have any reserved space for meditation, for multi-faith space, or one of those areas where you can pray during the day if you need to. So I started this email thread asking for advice from people in the building. People who shared this building were typically computer scientists at MIT, so this was shared with thousands of people. I don't know how I got the courage to do that, but I was like, I need to pray. Can someone give me advice? And the response was overwhelming. It was so interesting for me. It was a very interesting experience, because I started getting replies from people from different religious backgrounds, so not only Muslims, or people who practiced mindful meditation, or people who just had that meditation component in their life. And they all started giving me advice. Like, oh, you can book the conference room on the 8th floor, or you can use the phone booth, or these small reserved blocks we had in the building for people who needed privacy to make a phone call, but they did have enough space if you wanted to pray. So I started getting all this different kind of advice, and several people asked me to actually summarize it and send it to everyone else. So we ended up creating a small page and sending out an email with a summary of meditation spaces that you can use if you need to meditate or pray, or if you need any privacy during the day. So it was helpful, alhamdulillah. So my takeaway with respect to this session is being proactive and being confident about what you bring to the table can help promote an even more inclusive environment in your future workplace, inshallah. So try to keep that in mind. We can talk in the discussion about what to do if the environment just seems to be really toxic from the beginning. Because this wasn't the case for me, alhamdulillah. So it was generally more inclusive and had those components in place. And we were just trying to add more to it and make it even better. But if you do end up in a place that you don't get that vibe from the beginning, then this is something maybe we can discuss if you're interested in that, right? What to do. But actually this plays into it. So what to do, I feel like one of the things I always think about is seeking advice from mentors. More experienced professionals where you are. They don't necessarily have to be women, they don't necessarily have to be your same gender, but I would say at least have one of your mentors have that in common with you. So you might have other mentors, people who are experienced in your field, who are neither your religion or your gender, but try having multiple mentors. First of all, that's one thing that I was advised when I was younger, and I found it extremely helpful to have those people who are more senior, that I can trust, that I can chat with or send an email when I need to make an important decision in my life, when I need references or recommendations. It's really important to have a list of mentors that you trust in your life. It helps to have at least one of them share these markers with you. So if you find yourself, if you look around and actually find networks that would give you something like Muslim Women's Professional Network, if you are a Muslim woman, then that becomes a very helpful resource. if you ever in the workplace find yourself facing a situation and you're not sure, is this happening because I'm a Muslim woman? I probably need advice. Having this type of network becomes very helpful. And even though I moved to Atlanta not too far ago, but I came across this, I think some of you are already familiar with Muslim Women's Professional Network, and they started a mentorship program, right? So this is something you might want to check out, subscribe to, maybe you're even part of the organizing committee for it. This would be a helpful resource, having those types of mentors in your life, having an open conversation with them when you feel like you need to have a conversation about something. Those are useful people to have, right? Now, on the non-professional side, this is more on the professional end of things, right? On the non-professional side, I think it's helpful to have a strong social support network from people that you would consider friends or acquaintances that you really trust, who would give you that type of support outside of your professional circle. I think that's very important. When I reflect on my personal experience, I keep remembering, for example, my PhD years, especially towards the end, were a little more stressful, trying to wrap up your thesis. It was essential for me that I had a circle of Muslim sisters and people that I met every Jum'ah for halaqa or Quran discussion, and then we would go out for dinner or for coffee and whatnot. Having that social component with a circle and a network of women that I trusted really helped me a lot. So I think that's one takeaway that I would want to emphasize in a session like this. Okay, so those were sort of 5 different topics that I wanted to emphasize, but I do want to hear from you, either if you have input, comments about something that we said, or if you feel like something was left out that you would want us to have an open discussion about it. So I'm going to leave this for Q&A now.
Oh, yeah, is it starting?
Yes. Yeah. No, I meant I'm going to leave these uncovered topics for our current Q&A.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So I have a couple, but I'll just start with one, and
Okay.
then other people can ask. So I know one of my biggest issues is finding a balance between being ambitious and then being satisfied, because I'm never satisfied. Like, even if I'm getting the successes that I want, I start thinking about the next thing, and I don't even give myself time to just be grateful for what I just did get. So, like, how do you balance that, I guess?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's a very good thing for everyone to reflect on, right? Not only if you're a woman, not only if you're Muslim. Yeah, that sense of gratitude, I think you try to nurture it to make it part of your day-to-day life instead of waiting for that big milestone to experience gratitude, right? If you practice gratitude and practice rida, right? We call it rida, satisfaction, that inner serenity and satisfaction. When you practice having it in the smaller things, when a big milestone happens, you feel this is the cultivation of all of Allah's tawfiq and help and hard work, paid off. But you don't wait till that big moment happens to experience gratitude and have that positive feedback that comes back from gratitude. I think the more sustainable way of nurturing it in you is to do it on a day-to-day basis. So if on a day you had a meeting with maybe a senior or your professor and it went really well, at the end of the day, remind yourself of how blessed you were on that day, that this particular part of my professional aspirations went really well, even if it was a small part. Maybe that's one thing that I think if you consistently think about it, incorporate it into your prayer even, or your sujood, have that sense of gratitude and thankfulness to God, because even if you're working hard and persevering, if you have a certain success happen in your life, it's a combination of your hard work, but there has to be Allah's guidance and blessings, right? So I think nurturing that would help when the big events happen, that you pause and feel, okay, I should now celebrate this before moving on to the next aspiration. And part of celebrating it is being grateful for it. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it does. I guess my follow-up is like, I always thought it was a good thing to not be satisfied, but
reconciling ambition with gratitude, right?
Right. And then recently, I was hearing about how Islam tells you to, or I don't really know, like, Islam is about being satisfied at the same time. So I guess I'm confused. Like, am I supposed to be satisfied or am I supposed to be unsatisfied?
You know, there's a that's a very good point. Actually, so there's a saying by one of the companions. I think it's Sayyidina Umar, a beautiful saying. I don't know. I think it partially answers that dilemma, right? So I think Sayyidina Umar says, we had the dunya in our hands, but not in our hearts. So they were successful. Like among them were very successful businessmen. Sayyidina Uthman was able to purchase one time a land with a well. It was like a simple transaction for him, right? So they were rich and ambitious and wealthy and successful in their businesses, but they had it in their hands and not their hearts. I think that was a very profound thing to say, because it means even when you aspire to the next success and it feeds into your ambition, which you are allowed to have as a Muslim and encouraged, but you're encouraged to have it in a very specific way, in a way that doesn't dominate your thinking, because you're not after the materialistic success in and of itself. You're after excellence. You're after itqan, doing everything right, perfecting it for the sake of Allah. But it's our hearts that we kind of need to nurture in a way that makes us not really too fixated on the materialistic success, but more on, living up to the Islamic vision, our Muslim vision. I think part of that vision is excellence, doing well, being a good person, a good citizen. To do all of that, you need to be ambitious, right? If you're not ambitious, then you lose part of that thing. But I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. I don't know if anyone has more useful input or any input, please go ahead.
You mentioned vision, mission, and goals. I think one way to kind of measure that is when that goal is being completed, and you, of course, you establish new goals. But what that's, when you some measure of satisfaction of the vision is realized. But then if you step back and put things in perspective and you think you can do better, then of course.
Yeah, that's really good. Tying these different things together, right? How to put ambition in the bigger picture of what are your vision, mission, and goals are, right? So maybe going back to Noah's question, maybe it means taking a step back and actually asking yourself, what are my goals? How do they fit within the mission and the vision? Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And I think you had your hands.
Yeah, so go off of what you were saying, I think it's important to have ambition when it comes to deen and dunya. Sometimes we only focus on one or the other, and it's important to as we're professionally developing, to also spiritually develop too. And as we get older, I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, their spiritual maturity ended at a certain age, like Sunday school or something. And even at this age, we should be constantly, cautiously, trying to improve ourselves spiritually too. Because I think that feeds into your professional development, right? It adds barakah to whatever you're doing in the corporate world.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know.
No, definitely. So if spiritual growth, and tying it back to the point about mission and vision, if it is part of your goals and you're constantly conscious of it, then you incorporate it into your day-to-day, and that way spirituality doesn't get lost. It's so easy in our workplaces these days to just forget about spirituality, right? Yeah, I think that's, these are very important things to always have in our minds. Refresh the niyyah, the motivation every morning. Why are we doing this? Why are you going to work? Any other things you'd like to discuss? I know how you said you had several.
I have another one, but
Let's hear
my
from.
last one.
Okay, so let's do Tasneem and sorry, forgot your name, Fatma, and then Fatima.
Do you have any tips on time management, managing your career and also making time for prayer and meeting deadlines?
Yeah, that's
a struggle.
It's a constant struggle. It doesn't stop. You think it's because I'm a student. Maybe when I'm a grad student. Maybe when I'm a professor. Maybe time management is a constant thing that you're gonna have to work on, right? I feel like if I were to summarize it, I would say step number one is prioritizing things properly. I think a lot of time management degradation happens when you don't have your priorities set. So your priorities, you start the day, you have long-term priorities, but you also have short-term priorities. When you wake up, okay, today I want to get this part of the assignment for that difficult class out of the way, and I have maybe one meeting, and I need to incorporate my prayers in the day. So when distractions come along, you're not easily distracted, right? There's an interesting event by Club XYZ. Yes, I encourage you to have a social life and to be part of extracurriculum events and so on, but you have to have your priorities straight as well. So prioritize, plan, leave room for flexibility and feedback if things change during the day, but prioritize, plan, and feel more comfortable saying no to things that don't fall within your priorities. If you're asked to serve on something that doesn't really fall within your priorities, you feel like it might look good on my CV, but you just have to find a delicate balance or equilibrium, as someone here suggested for a title for another session. So it is finding an equilibrium between your goals, prioritizing, and focus. So even when you get your priorities right and you think you started the day right, just so many distractions these days, right? Put limits on your social media time per day. Prevent apps on your phone from sending you notifications if they're not going to change your life that day. You started doing that? Is it helpful?
Oh no, I was gonna add to what you which.
Yeah, please do.
Something that helps me, and this is just for day-to-day time management, because life can get very busy, right? And like especially when you're doing extracurriculars at the same time. I go to sleep every night. Before I go to sleep every night, I know exactly what I'm doing the next day. Like I'll prioritize in my head, whether you're a paper person, for me, I do it all in my head, but like I'll sort of write it down. I don't know, it's weird. But anyways, I go to
at least
sleep.
visualize it. You think
I
about it.
visualize it, exactly,
Yeah.
and I just like look at my calendar and like how my classes are lined up and where I have the breaks, and I'll plan the day.
Yeah.
And when I do that, my next day goes like fluidly. Like I know exactly what I'm doing between classes. I know exactly when my breaks are, when I'm praying, when I'm doing this and this. Whereas the days that I don't do that, it's all over the place, and I'm kind of just like doing it as it goes, and things don't go as planned, and then by the end of the night, I haven't accomplished some of those things, and I have to move them to the next day. But when I plan it the night before, it works out really well.
Plan and prioritize.
Yeah,
you
plan and
did both things.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's exactly important. And going back to, because you said spiritual, sorry, one more addition, because you also said how to have the balance between spirituality and professional life. So when you prioritize, you want to prioritize the parts that feed into your spiritual life, right? So prioritize praying, which means, so this might get a little tricky, because I, for example, try to prioritize Jumu'ah prayers, and sometimes they overlap with meetings or department events or something, and I wouldn't be able to do them every Friday. As women, we don't even have to do them, right? But I wanted that spiritual charge every Friday to give me some dhikr, remembrance. But sometimes if I have some margin of flexibility, I would try to enforce it. So if they're trying to have a meeting at 1 o'clock that could easily be put in 12 or 11:30, then I would suggest that. I would be proactive about it. Like, you know what, 1 p.m. might not be the best time for me. I have something else going on. Or maybe even be open about it and say I have my prayers or meditation at that time of the day, so let's push this earlier, and people respect your priorities. Sorry, I interrupted you when you were about to give a follow-up.
I was gonna say thank you for like that really helps.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then we had Fatima and Yara.
Okay.
Do you want to
My question was about, you were talking about the imposter syndrome. I feel like for me, a lot of it comes from like not wanting to speak or like give my opinion if I'm not like 100% sure. Whereas like, especially like for me, like a lot of times I'm like the only girl in like a room of like 30 people, right? So like if I speak incorrectly, it's like, okay, like wow, she's the dumb girl, right?
Yeah.
So like I just like
imposter.
It's like, where's the line of like speaking when you know, and like
You know what's interesting? There was a survey study that surveyed people and broke the answers down by gender. And when you break it by gender, for a man and a woman who both have the same level of knowledge and competency, the man is more likely to express his opinion, whereas the woman is always more skeptical about, wait, am I knowledgeable enough to say something about that? So what you're experiencing is natural, according to average statistics. But what ends up happening is, even if you express something and it's not entirely correct, so what, right? Other people don't worry about doing that, and they're right not to worry, because if you're sitting in a meeting, you can prefix whatever you're gonna say with, you know what, I'm not entirely sure, but I think this problem that you're talking about, how about we approach it using this particular approach or something, right? So it's good to participate, and it's healthy to participate with that confidence level. being even communicated up front. You're like, you know what, I'm not entirely an expert on this, but I think so-and-so. And that, I think, is healthy for the overall discussion. So why not do that, right? Don't worry too much about the aftermath of that. Oh, they're gonna think I'm so-and-so. Everyone's busy thinking about themselves, really. Everyone's a little more narcissistic than what you think. They're not worried too much about, oh, this person is you know, the IQ predicted for her is. Just be open about your thoughts, I hope that helps. Because over time I just realized I'm too worried about my insecurities in a way that stopped me from participating in important discussions. My mentors helped me recognize that and fix it over time. So I think, don't worry too much about what people are gonna think.
I'm sorry, I keep adding, but
no, of course,
I would also add that, first of all, like, you're never gonna get comfortable if you don't try and, like, you know, fail or whatever. Or you might surprise yourself and be right constantly, and then that gives you the confidence. But also, I recently asked the same question to a consultant, because I've always been curious, like, how do consultants feel comfortable, like, advising companies that have been there for, like, decades, and, like, literally you just graduated, like, how do you know what you're talking about? And every consultant I ask this question to says it's literally, like, fake it till you make it. Like, their mentors, first of all, they say that, like, their bosses are also the same way, where, like, they'll come out of a meeting with a client and be like, I have no idea what I just said, but you know what, like, I'm, like, companies are asking you because they don't know. So, like, whatever you say, they're just gonna take it. And, like, obviously they know what they're talking about. It's just, like, it's all about BSing it until you get there. So
I wouldn't go as far as saying BS.
Yeah, like, don't BS it, but, you know, like, you have to say what's on your mind, like, and then you'll learn from that.
I struggle with that in teaching, because if I'm teaching a topic, when I was a graduate student starting my first TA experience, teaching assistant experience, I was so intimidated about this idea of standing and giving a tutorial to students, because I thought, if I stand there, everything that comes out of my mouth has to be 100% correct. And then I realized, okay, what if I make mistakes? Like, it's not, so what? It's not the end of the world. You know, I felt even more confidence telling the students, oh wait, I think, oh, there's a typo, there's something wrong, or I solved this incorrectly. Who wants to help me fix the error, right? Or if someone points out an error that I did, I became so comfortable in my skin dealing with these situations. And at the end of the day, the students know that you're not a perfect person, maybe your customers. With consultants and customers, I'm not sure if you want to take the same approach. But there are many environments where it's perfectly fine not to say things that are 100% correct, and it's all part of the evolution process, right? When you're in a research environment, it's all part of trying to, you know, optimize your problem by, you know, suggesting different things. Some of them are wrong, some of them are right. You really shouldn't be limiting yourself from participating in the conversation, definitely. So I agree. We have Yara and
I had a similar question.
similar questions. Okay, so let's maybe take, do we have time for two more questions?
Maybe one more.
Oh, we had male participation. And they're a minority now. Let's do two quick ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, two quick.
You can go ahead. Okay, thank you. It's a funny thing, as you said, minority. I was just thinking about that. So I wanted to ask, so what can we, like men, maybe do to help, like, our fellow sisters, maybe other, like, female workers to be more successful in the workshop? Because, like, sometimes we do stuff unintentionally, or, like, we think that we know all, but, like, what stuff, like, do you think that, I hope that guy knew?
No, that's a great question, and I can tie it back to my own male mentors, right? So let's take the second question, and then I'll try to summarize the answer for both of them, so we have enough time. So do you want to also put your question on the table?
My question was that just sometimes I struggle with finding the balance. Like, people say I'm not assertive as, like, a leader, and I've gotten that before, but sometimes I think that just, like, as you know, like, sometimes you want to find a balance, because, like, I think also as a woman, like, sometimes when you come off, like, if you're assertive, it comes off, like, in a different way.
It's perceived as
you know?
aggressive,
perceived more as, like,
yes.
aggressive. So then maybe I'm, like, overcompensating by being, like, nicer, and I just want to know, like, you know, maybe your thoughts on, like, the balance of that, and if you.
Yeah, those are two great points. So I'm gonna try to
we
summarize.
can talk later though. If you
We can do
like,
the rest of the discussion offline. If I were to summarize maybe my key points in respect to both questions. So the first one, I had great male mentors. So my postdoc advisor was an extremely supportive professor, and the rest of my lab mates as well. And I think by maybe holding back on situations where men just take over the conversation without giving space to everyone on the table. So my professor did a great job making sure that everyone on the table participated. If he saw someone shy sitting in the corner raising their hand but no one's really paying attention to them, he would take charge and say, oh, let's hear from person X, right? So I think whenever you're in a position where you can help in fostering a more inclusive environment, then yeah, try to be as proactive as you can in that sense. And I immediately think of those male mentors that I had in my professional life who really helped foster that kind of environment. If you're in a less powerful position, but you find yourself in a situation where you can still participate somehow and help, maybe that's a longer discussion we can take offline. But that's the first thing that came to my mind. With assertiveness, that's a very common problem with women in positions of authority. And I would say we shouldn't aspire to take the kindness and niceness out of our nature, but we should try to put it in a frame where we get things done by being assertive yet thoughtful. So I'm not going to say try to, take the other extreme or, overcompensate by worrying about potential perception of who you are. No, don't worry about perceptions too much at this point. Forget the external narrative. Focus on how you want to be. You want to be a person who's thoughtful and kind, but also assertive? Then just try to be that. Don't worry about how you're going to perceive me. Because if you start thinking or surrendering to that line of thought, it's very easy to just go on one extreme or the other. Okay? All right. Sorry for going over time. I hope we've covered the main questions and we can have other offline conversations. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as you have said about celebrating both the small and the great accomplishments by gratitude, we hope you would accept our gift as a way of expressing
Gift for
and
me.
honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Everyone, please stay on floor 2. We have our second set of parallel workshops happening in Press Room B, Staying Financially Healthy, a guide for Muslim millennials. And Press Room A, we have Cracking the Career Insider Advice on how to land a job.